on. I saw this guy reacting to some Final Fantasy hot takes. Now, if you're living under a rock, and it must be a really nice rock, you'd be missing out on one of my favorite franchises in all of video gaming. And I didn't want to listen to the video too much, so I recommend you go and find this list for yourself. It's on Reddit. It is what Final Fantasy hot takes. Which Final Fantasy hot take will you die on? So I'm just gonna go through this list very casually, and I'm checking my timer because I do have something cooking, and I will let you know agree, disagree, my thoughts on the matter. I normally don't go on Reddit very often, although when I do, I find very interesting content, and I like to react to things fresh, and rather than piggyback off someone else, we're gonna do it my way. So this is me reacting to hot takes that are asking, "Will you die on these hills for them?" Starting with Alex here. Presentation is a huge part of the series. I don't know why I've been seeing the sentiment that Final Fantasy focuses on its presentation too much, when I feel that it's a big part of been a big part of its identity for the longest time. It usually pushes the envelope on production value, so when people say it shouldn't focus a lot on its presentation, I feel that they're removing one of the series' notable aspects. FF7 and 10 got a lot of attention for that aspect alone. I'm not saying it should only focus on graphics at the cost of everything else, but it is an important thing about this series. I 100% agree with that. And I think Final Fantasy VII was like the pinnacle. That was breaking new grounds. Because remember, everything up until that point, it was 8 or 16-bit. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, that's just a product of the time, obviously. But Final Fantasy VII was, this is what the game could look like on a much bigger and more powerful console. And if you're, I recommend people looking into the development history of Final Fantasy VII, because originally it was going to be, I guess it was, the concept was it was going to be on like a Nintendo 64 cart at one point, and the demos for it looked really, really weird. So obviously that, then there's all that mess for another day. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video. But I think presentation should play an absolute big role in Final Fantasy, because they're only pushing the envelope even more. My only concern is that I'm worried that they're going to make it so much about it being a visual novel that it's going to deter the story itself. Um, which I feel like has kind of been waning in the last few games. And I'm including the last expansion or two from Final Fantasy XIV when I say that as well. Uh, Back in the day, we all wanted to play FF10 because of how good it looked. Oh, that's true. Like that was a big. That was the game that made me want to get a PS2. I'll admit that right up. And the cutscenes were better than movies. We said, of course, we got pulled into the story and other aspects. Yeah, of course. Like that was the first Final Fantasy on the next generation console, which really kind of sucks for Final Fantasy IX of how late that came out in the life cycle of the PlayStation One. By the way, don't sleep on that game. Go check out Final Fantasy IX. You're missing out on some arguably one of the strongest games in the franchise. But yeah, no, 10 was the complete package. I mean, I easily put it in my top three favorite PlayStation 2 games of all time. It could even be in my top five of all time favorite video games. If not top five, definitely top 10. Story text is so good it should have been a main series entry. I'm gonna disagree with that on only the aspect that if it were to do that, then I don't think it would be a tactics games. I think it would just be a spin-off. I think tactics works on its own merit, and I think it should just stick to that. I was always surprised Tactics never got a console release after War of the Lions was made. Tactics is a franchise that I have very little experience in. I have played it and I do really like it, and I'm excited to play the game when it comes out. Oh, here's a good one. The laugh scene in 10 is actually very important for both character development, Yuna's especially. Specifically, is that even a word? As it is the one that best shows to her that there are other ways to live apart from the only one she knows, which is in a general One of the only 2 points Titus being essential to plot, she needed to be allowed to be just a dumb 17-year-old. I agree it's essential for the plot. I do disagree with why you think that is. Because keep in mind, up until this point, what do we know has happened so far in that game? We know two very important things. We know that, number one, that Yuna's ultimate sacrifice to defeating Sin will result in her death, which she does not know. I believe that. Yeah, I believe that information she doesn't know. And then the other part is Titus. No, Titus. It should be Titus, not Titus. Titus discovering that Sin is his Jacked, his father. So keep in mind, like, this is at a point where both of them are pretty vulnerable because they're realizing, they're quite literally like it. They're quite literally realizing they're on a crash course to what could be like the end of the road in their mission, I guess you could say. Or no, I'm sorry. I think I got it mixed up. I think Yuna knows that this is going to result in her sacrifice. Titus does not. Titus is then realized that Sin, the main baddie of the game, is his father. Okay, my apologies. Sorry. So they're kind of in the moment having their own reasons for sulking, and the whole point of that laughing scene is them just kind of taking a step back and literally laughing at the situation, laughing at the almost the promise of death, which the forced laughter is just kind of their way of basically saying, like, this is not gonna fully take control, like, envelop them to where they're not gonna live life. Does that make sense? Like, they're not letting where they are currently get them down for the sake of the mission. They're quite literally laughing in the face of death. Or at least that's what I got from it. Although this is a really interesting way of looking at it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's cool we can all come to different interpretations of what these things mean. 15, I have a very minimal experience with 15. Did actually deliver on the whole brotherhood and companionship thing and had one of the best examples of it in the series for me. I can't say if it's the best, but I do say that as the group as a whole, you definitely get the feeling like it's a bunch of bros. Final Fantasy II is a fun game once you accept the mechanics are different. You can play that game a million different ways. Maybe a million, maybe not a million, but a lot. Okay, so this I guess is a hot take in the sense that a lot of people dislike Final Fantasy II and often refer to it as one of the worst mainline Final Fantasies. It's because the leveling system, there's no jobs in this game. The plot is basically a wash, rinse, repeat of the first game. It felt like they took a lot of back steps. But I can see where they're coming from. I think the game is just different enough to make it interesting. It's kind of like that whole chocolate vanilla argument for ice cream. Sometimes you're in the mood for vanilla, sometimes you're in the mood for chocolate, sometimes you just say screw it and you want strawberry. I think people just dislike this game because it deters you away from what the 1 through 6 offered, and out of that 6, it is, yes, the worst of those games. But I actually don't think it's so bad that it's a bad game. The best change in FF7 Remake is that they fleshed out the female characters. They actually feel like real people and not just bit players to push the story around. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And I also say they did it to a fault. In the original Final Fantasy VII, there was a big problem in the character development department. Only a small handful of characters actually got character development, or really arcs for that matter. Barrett barely had one. His was rough and tough, don't give a crap attitude, bioterrorist. And he really doesn't get that conclusion until he confronts Dyne, who has very little reason to act the way that he's. I mean, if you really think about it, he's just basically killing people in that game because he's pissed off. And then he's mad at Barret, and I'm like, bro, he literally held on to your hand until Shinra, like, literally shot his, like, he shot the hand that was literally holding on to his best friend that was dangling over the cliff, and that he was the only way he let him go. He quite literally could not have done anything else. So that just felt weird. But, like, anyway, back to the female characters. I absolutely agree. I think the relationship dynamic between Ares and Tifa was amazing. I feel like they didn't quite do it a lot in Final Fantasy VII. You really kind of have to read through the lines on that one. They existed as friends, albeit maybe even almost like sisters, and I really thought that was nice. I never really got the whole Ares is in the cloud. I don't necessarily think that she was in the cloud. I think that I think Cloud reminded her of Zack. But then there's the whole Tifa thing where I felt like in 7, she obviously cares and is concerned for Cloud, but she feels an awful lot more like an enabler once she realized where the plot's going. And in that game, I felt like they were giving the female characters just a little bit more oomph, a little bit more character, which is nice. Like, Yuffie, even to a certain degree, had some motivation in here, as opposed to the original game, where she's just kind of there, and you really don't invest anything into her unless once you go to Wutai and you start doing her stuff. Lore-wise, Final Fantasy XIII has one of the best worlds they have ever crafted. The idea of humanity trapped on this floating prison, very Attack on Titan-esque, to be beholden to these manipulative gods who you hope never single you up for divine purpose is so cool to me. And we got a response. I think the issue with 13's world building is that you're never really allowed to explore or get a feel for Cocoon. It throws you right into things, and there's nothing resembling a hometown, a main hub, or anything that really ties you to the world. Both really good points. I don't have too much experience with 13, but I will say this. I think the world building in 13 is excellent. It has a ton of potential, and I agree with the second person's response by saying you do not get enough time really experiencing hometown. But I'm going to kind of use that logic against them. In every other Final Fantasy game, how often are you stuck in a hometown? 8 is good. Friendo, that may be the big one. And it's because I have gone back and forth on this game for so long. I love it. I dislike it. I love it again. It's a very love-hate relationship. My issue with Final Fantasy VIII is that I think there is so much there as far as the world that is presented to you. The lore. The story is so confusing, but it's you're at least intrigued enough with it to keep going. But the combat system works against you. The draw mechanic makes it tedious. The card game is only fun in its base format, and again, that's my opinion. I think once they start adding special rules is when it gets really lame. The plot gets really crazy toward the end, and a lot of the characters kind of suck. They kind of suck. Squall is not this amazing leader character. He's basically propped up by everyone else around him who are pretty useless. I mean, I would argue there's not really a lot of useful characters in Final Fantasy VIII aside from Laguna. Even his squad are good. They're good support characters that lift him up. In this, it's like Cloud is an aloof dick. Quistis is useless. Selphie is useless except for her limit break. Zell is obnoxious. Rinoa is boring and bland. Irvine is kind of cool and kind of interesting, and they did work with him a little bit. I think 8, the presentation of 8 is really good. I think the final execution of it really needs to be fixed. It really, really needs to be fixed. As it stands right now, I can't say it's a good game. I will say it's an interesting game, and I will say it is a fine game right now. If there was ever a Final Fantasy that needs a little bit of love, it is this game, and it needs that remake treatment. It really does. And if they ever were to do it, for the love of God, they have got to give better personality and better writing and some emotion to these characters, because the fact that the secondary characters and the places you go are putting the main characters in second place the entire time is not a good showing of how good these characters are. Moving on. Final Fantasy 12 is top 5. I really want to try Final Fantasy 12. I heard that a lot of what made the newer Final Fantasies now can be contributed to 12. And I've heard it's a huge underappreciated game. It's just that the overall story, from what I heard, just doesn't really have that big of a conclusion. But I'm like, if the 95% of the game can get you all the way there, and I just have like a minor lackluster ending, I can almost give that a pass. I mean, because even Final Fantasy VII had kind of a really weak ending. I don't know if it's a hot take, but Tidus, while goofy and oddly upbeat, is the perfect protagonist for the depressing world of Spira and Final Fantasy X. I think his upbeat nature was a great juxtaposition for a world where people wait for death from every corner. I guess my question was am I not remembering the people in Final Fantasy X correctly? I don't remember everyone was all doom and gloom. Like, everyone seemed pretty okay. Maybe I'm just not remembering it correctly, but everyone knows that Yuna is going to do the final sending, whatever it was called. It's been a while since I played 10. And I think everyone was more or less at peace. I mean, granted, yeah, people were living in fear because Sin can just show up and just destroy people. And I guess in that regard, yes. And I will agree in that regard with impending doom. And people were kind of content with the fact that Yuna's sacrifice was going to save them. But also then there was that attack that happened in the game where you watched Yuna sending the souls, and that kind of like brought the reality to the game right at the forefront. And I agree that yes, Tidus as a character, his energy was really able to kind of like counteract a lot of like the depressiveness and the sadness in that game. I will also make a counterpoint that I think Zidane in Final Fantasy IX was a good precursor to that, because remember, he was pretty much upbeat and positive throughout the entire game, and he was an encouraging character to everyone involved in the game. It's only when he's actually experiencing sadness or depression that's when that kind of hits you, because you're like, this isn't normal and you're not supposed to be feeling this. Like, you are invested in the character, just like in 10 they made you invested in Tidus. There is actually no bad mainline Final Fantasy. I can't call any of them actually genuinely bad games. I played all FF. I played, and not just 7 and 10, but X2 and 13, all of them. um uh I can't agree with that. I'd still probably put like 2 at the bottom. I wouldn't say it's a bad game from beginning to end, if that's what they mean. But I mean, if I had to rank them, 2 would probably be at the bottom of the list. Final Fantasy IX and the going back to the roots setting wise brought fresh air into the series, and I would love to have a game like that again. Absolutely. 7 and 8. 7 brought it to a whole other franchise. 8 tried to match it, but I would say it failed in comparison. 9 went right back to the roots, and it just knocked it out of the park. Everything from the world to the characters to the music, they went back to the original like medieval aesthetic, and I absolutely loved it. And it was super refreshing at the time. And they took everything that made 7 and 8, as far as the interface and the mechanics. I think a lot of it carried over into 9, and I just think it was more refined, and it just did it really, really well. I think it was the best Final Fantasy product on the PlayStation before it moved to PlayStation 2. I'm not even sure if this is a hot take or not, but Esthar is the best, most effectively designed, most visually pleasuring, futuristic of all the cities. I have no opinion on that. Since ranking FF seems so important to people, they need to learn to distinguish between personal feeling from critical analysis. Just because you enjoy a particular game doesn't mean, just because you enjoy a particular game that doesn't always mean it's the best. Yes, of course, that's exactly what it means. I do think there is something there when you're saying, when you're ranking them, you distinguish your personal feeling from actual critical analysis. there is some truth to that. Obviously, not every Final Fantasy is going to be your first, and that I think is going to take away from the experience of all the others. Um, so I guess what they're saying is if you're going to rank them, like rank them across the board. I think the problem goes both ways. Just because you don't like a game, you don't like how a game did something, doesn't make it objectively bad either. No, of course not. Like that's why I think when people say this is my personal list, you're basically saying this is my take and it's not yours. For so many people, their first FF is their best FF. Can I say that? Is Final Fantasy VII my first? No, it was not. It was not. The very first Final Fantasy was my first. So, no, that is incorrect. It is not true, at least not for me. It's all subjective. How do you objectively say one game is better than the other? It just comes down to personal experiences, how you connect with the story and the characters. Moving on. My hot take, Final Fantasy VIII is a great game. Junctioning is enjoyable. Drawing isn't as necessary as the people think because of refining items and card mod where it's at. I love a good time paradox, so 8 is the best Final Fantasy of the PS1 era. For anyone who wants to go 8 is not better than 7, I'd rather draw magic than level materia. My friend, that right there is the biggest hot take of this entire list. 100% disagree with you. I'm gonna tell you where you started losing me. FF is a great game. First of all, can be a great game to me. Again, I don't hate it. I think it's a fine game. Junctioning is enjoyable. I do like junctioning. I think the GF system in that game is an interesting system. Drawing isn't necessary as people think because of refining items and card mod isn't where it's at. Okay, stop right there. 100% incorrect on that one. It is absolutely necessary in that game if you're going to level up your stats. If not, your character is going to be grossly underleveled within like the first somewhere around the 5 to 8 hour mark, and you're going to start noticing it when you're not doing enough damage, you're taking a lot of damage. It absolutely is a necessary system by design because you want to draw as many of those different elements and spells from enemies to level up your junctions, which are your HP, your strength, and so on. And by the way, refining items and using the card mod, that's easier, but it takes more time. So to say that it isn't necessary because of refining items and card mod, yes, it is, but it just takes more time. And if you're cool with taking the longer road, by all means. I love a good time paradox. I do think that what they were going for was really interesting with that. But the final line can't do it. I'd rather draw magic all day than level materia. My friend, you haven't lived until you've been trying to level materia in the Northern Crater on 7. If you would rather sit and draw materia from creatures so that everyone has... Or, I'm sorry, if you want to draw magic from creatures until every single member in your game, not just your party, has 99 of that per battle, rather than fighting enemies, leveling up your materia, moving your materia around, like materia in Final Fantasy VII is arguably one of the most fun things you can do, because of the different options that come with it, and there are so many cool materia builds that you can make in Final Fantasy VII, and I encourage people to go and check it out. So probably the biggest hot take, but I'm happy that they like Final Fantasy VIII. It's actually a pretty popular game with very vocal haters. Its worst problem, yes, I think its biggest problem was that it came after 7. I think if that game were to have come out, if that was like the 9 of the series, like if Final Fantasy 9 was 8 and 9, basically if you swap 8 and 9, I think the reception for both would have been better. I think going back to the medieval setting for the Fallout to 7, I think would have sat well. And I think them returning to a more futuristic setting with another one would have worked. I think going off and on can work. 8 is not better than 7. For the record, one of them had a banging card game. 7 didn't have a card game. But, again, I'm going to refer to a prior point. Triple Triad is a good game, and I love the game, and the music for it is amazing. I don't think you're remembering what the game was like once you got outside the base hometown rules. It gets really obnoxious. I just played 789 ported on the Switch, by the way. I recommend doing that as well. It looks great on the Switch. I beat them all on the PlayStation originally as a kiddo, and 8 was my least favorite. As an adult, 8 is my best Final Fantasy on PlayStation 1. Easy call. Good for you. I don't think I could say that. Like, there's a lot there that I think could be better, but is held back by what the game wants you to do versus how you've been already predisposed to doing. This isn't exactly a spicy hot take, but Final Fantasy X has the best combat system in the series. Let's go. Let's go. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. 10 has one of the best battle systems in the freaking game. The fact that you get the lineup in the top corner of the screen so you know what's coming up next, and you can do, like, slow and haste to manipulate that. And let me put it this way, it was so good that it was copied by Lord of the Rings games, okay? In fact, a pretty common, yeah, pretty much. Final Fantasy games were historically never open world, so 10 and 13 hallway exportation was less of a... I don't think the argument has ever been made that they were open world. I feel like a lot of Final Fantasies have been pretty linear. Like, you can only go so far on the map. I think the argument being made here is how 13 feels like it's a hallway game. And I'm like, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think what happens in games that are very, like, story-driven is that people just want to spend too much time outside of the mainline story. I think 13 was trying to kind of hone that in. I have nothing on 14. I got nothing to add to that. So we'll do, like, one... We'll do a few more, and then we'll call it. I'm just seeing if there's any here that... Yuna is X2 is a masterclass in storytelling, and her development as logical fits her character and her background, and ultimately one of the best explored characters in the series. Relatedly, I don't like your plan, it sucks. Isn't just one of the funniest lines in the franchise. It's also the kickoff to a beautiful speech that really helps culminate. Okay, so this is talking about 10-2, the spin-off. First of all, there's a lot to like about this game. I just think it's hampered by some really cheesy writing, and it's never going to beat 10. But, I think what the game does and offers, I think, is a nice little closure to the character of Yuna, and I feel like you should give it a try. Put some respect on that game. I don't know if I would say masterclass, but I would definitely say it is... I would say it's a really good example of, like, character development. There are no ugly Moogles. They're all adorable. I don't care about Moogles. No, the remake Moogles are terrifying. FF15 is awesome. Yes, Square ruined its potential because they wanted to release it finally. I would die for seeing what Nomura originally planned. It's a shame that last DLCs got canceled, but had a lot of fun with it. I don't hate 15. I don't. I think it just gets a lot of hate because there's some cringe characters at Prompto, probably being one of the biggest cringe characters in the game. I don't necessarily think it's a bad game. My top 5 are 9, 14, 10, 15, and 7. Bro, you're putting 15 above 10? That is ballsy. That is ballsy. More about Van, which I have no opinion of. X2 does not have the best combat in the whole series. A lot of it's carrying over from 10, I believe. There's nothing wrong with 13 and X being linear games. Yes and no. It's helpful if it has a big enough story. It's annoying if you're going to take one of the biggest defining features of Final Fantasy and you're going to seclude it to, like, narrow hallways and rarely being able to explore. That's one of the biggest things that have made Final Fantasy huge since the first game. It's being able to explore. And I'm sorry. Hold on. How in the world do you come off of like Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 12, which had vast worlds to explore, and then you get to 13 and everything feels like you're just stuck on a hallway? 11 deserves more love and recognition. So this would be their first MMO that they tried doing, which was a pain back in the day to get. I mean, you were better off owning it on PC than console. Yeah, so I don't know if people remember this. So you can get it one of two ways. You download it on PC, or you get it on PS2. You had to own the fat model PS2 because there was a hard drive that you had to put into the back compartment. Yeah, you didn't know about that compartment, or you forgot about it. You'd have to have the network adapter attached to the hard drive that you put in the back of the console, and then that was how you played 11. Or you played the PC port. The PC port also you had to have a monthly membership to play online, I think it was called. I have often heard that 11 is a MMO grindhouse, but the spirit of Final Fantasy in it is so good and so rich, and people just love the challenge. And I do agree. I think it deserves some recognition, but I think I think Final Fantasy 14 as it stands now is testament to this is what an MMO could be. Is there any way to play it now? Yes, but it's annoying, and I wouldn't recommend messing with it if you've never you basically have to get your own server and do it that way, and unless you've never done it, I would recommend not doing it. FF should always have a playable party. It's been a real shame to see the disappear of the last decade. What are you talking about? This is the coldest take possible on this sub, no disrespect. I mean, I don't know if that's a take on the active battle system or the MMOs or with 16 basically being a party of one. I mean, whatever, I guess. Again, it's different flavors, man. Squall is nope, not even close. Not the best main character in the entire series. Not even close. Not even close. Squall is so far behind everyone else. Zidane is a better best main character. Terra, for crying out loud, is like one of the best characters in Locke. I'd argue half the characters in Final Fantasy VI are better. Squall he adds nothing to the game. All right, one more. Whether you fans like it or not, Final Fantasy 11 and 14 are mainline games. It doesn't matter what you think and what you playing through the series and skipping them means to you. They are mainline games, and you're not less of a fan. And you're not less of a fan for skipping them either. Second hot take is that I love 14's combat. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's 16. That's 16. I love 16 combat. It's not perfect or better than Remake Rebirth combat, but it is more fun. Okay, so actually, I see one below that. That's going to be the last one. Yes, 11 and 14 are absolutely mainline series games, and I think the reason why people are so quick to say no is because they're MMOs. And I think people who are so used to playing RPGs or JRPGs, the moment an MMO gets introduced, they run away as far as they can. They don't want to get involved in that. They're intimidated by it. They don't want to mess with it. And I understand because I've been there. But they're absolutely mainline series games. They have characters, they have their own soundtracks, they have their own plots, own expansive worlds. Don't sleep on them. It doesn't matter what you think and what you playing through this series and skipping them means to you. They are mainline games, and you're not less of a fan for skipping them either. And I agree. You're not a fan. Just MMOs are not everyone's or they're not everyone. Again, chocolate vanilla. Second hot take is 16's combat. It's not perfect or better than. Okay, so I agree with that. It's not better if it is fun. I mean, so far these aren't really that many hot takes aside from a couple, but we'll end it on this. Sephiroth is dead for the entirety of Final Fantasy VII, bar the calm flashback. The main antagonist in the game is Jenova, and the writing tries to make that clear but fails. Okay. Edit to add. If you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, then you haven't played every Final Fantasy. It ought to be included to some extent in your full series playthroughs, and the free trial market makes it that easy. It's insane how controversial saying 14 and 11 are mainline Final Fantasy games is. God help FF fans if this is the one of the games that is a bit out of their comfort zone. Is that a hot take? This is my understanding of the plot of Final Fantasy VII. I never thought the one you were chasing throughout most of the game is Genova, but the one in the Northern Crater actually is Sephiroth. Yes, yes. 7 is my favorite and most played Final Fantasy game dating back to my youth. And yeah, when you hit the nail on the head, the real Sephiroth of the story dies when Cloud throws him into the Nibelheim reactor. From there, Sephiroth's main villain is actually an amalgamation of Genova with Sephiroth's memories and consciousness. While it is functionally Sephiroth is a man, it's really just Genova given more of a solid form and motivation beyond its role as a parasite to the Cetra and Gaia. The compilation and remake have changed this to be more Sephiroth using manipulating Genova's cells and living corpse, but in the original game, Sephiroth we chase and fight is at least 50% more. Yes, and I will end it on this one. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people when they play this game, they really don't understand that it's Genova. Because like if you remember what's happening throughout that game, and especially like right before up until like Cloud cracks. Cloud is literally goes through a mental break, and then you realize that like you're not actually fighting Sephiroth, but you're fighting, I guess you could even call them clones, but I like how they worded it. It's like an amalgamation, but it's really just Genova cells to be modified to look like Sephiroth. You actually don't fight him until the very end of the game. And that's because he has literally been, in the Northern Crater. But they really did not do the greatest of jobs bringing that point home. And I will say that for first-time players, when they played 7, they really thought it was Sephiroth. It was like that was who you're fighting the whole beginning of the game, and Genova was a secondary character. And I really feel like had they put more emphasis on Genova, and that's saying a lot coming from me, I feel like that kind of revelation could have really hit home. Like it was Genova, because they do fight Genova and variations of Genova, but you do see but Cloud sees Sephiroth. But I don't know if you realize this, but the narration device of this game is that Cloud is not a reliable narrator. Just based on when they're doing flashback scenes, even Tifa is like, Cloud, are you sure that happened? You're realizing his mind is breaking and he's losing it. And I feel like in the remake, they really made a point to emphasize that he is not okay. So, no, this was fun. This was good. Opinions, Final Fantasy opinions, for those who are out there, let me know what you think. Until then, I'm definitely feeling the urge to play some Final Fantasy. Let's go, baby.